that works. Extreme noob version of live. There we go.
Live on YouTube.
Yeah, okay, it seems to work. We are live.
G'day, Dagan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Wow. Baymail. Wow. Please tell us more about it.
Sure thing. Baymail is a, well, what do you know about it so far? It would be great to get an idea of what level we're talking about here.
I'm basically found out about Satoshi 3 weeks ago and did a deep dive. And Money Button, Ryan from Money Button got me excited about the user interface of that. And then of course the Paymail was in there. I'm like, okay, there's a Paymail thing. This is email. Okay, but how do I send an email? How do I send an email? So in his videos, he talks about Paymail, and okay, I had a quick look.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, great. Well, in which case, I guess I should start. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. This frames it well. So Paymail is, yes, it's a new and separate protocol to email. And I've gone and confused things by essentially replicating some of the user interface of email on Paymail. So I can understand why that might be confusing just coming into things. I mean, the good news is Paymail is better than email, because as well as being able to transmit data, you can transmit money. And that's sort of for the first time within the same protocol, you can do that. So I guess the important thing to understand is what is email, first of all, because that's a non-trivial thing. So email is a peer-to-peer protocol, just like Bitcoin is. And it allows you to, obviously send messages to a domain name, and specifically a user at a particular domain name. So I mean, that's where Paymail reflects email, right? So you've got the username and you have the domain name. And essentially what's happening is this domain name is a server somewhere, some physical server, and that redirects messages into an inbox associated with this user. So in the same fashion, Paymail essentially goes to this domain, and it looks up, instead of an email protocol, it does a request with Paymail protocol, or BSV alias protocol. And that BSV alias protocol server backend sends, it takes a look at its database of Paymail users, finds this user, and does one of a number of things depending on the capability. So the first capability is payment address resolution. So that would be, for this username, please return the next Bitcoin address associated with that user. So they're sort of like their money inbox, but that's something that changes every time, which allows privacy. So the great thing about not having to broadcast a QR code, if you're accepting donations, for example, if you use Paymail, it uses a new Bitcoin address every time you get paid. And that's because that's managed by this server, which gives you a new address every time a payment destination request is made. Does that make sense so far?
Basically.
Okay, so that was one aspect of Paymail protocol that Baymail uses. The other aspect is encryption. So there is something in Paymail protocol, a capability called PKI, which is public key infrastructure. So it's kind of used as sort of a proxy for an identity. Now, the important thing to note here is that the Paymail username and domain, that as a concept is so familiar to people because of email that we use that like it was a person basically on the internet, right? So Degan at Probatus is my sort of identity online. No one else has control of that address, and that's controlled by a number of things, email servers, and these days Paymail servers as well. So the idea is that as long as I keep my keys, that Paymail will point to a public key called my PKI. And if I lose my keys, I keep the Paymail, and the public key changes because we have to generate new keys with a new password and so on. So that means that even if you lose your keys, you keep your identity, and that's the really important part about payment. That's the usability advantage. Also, it just means that you can send money to Darren at Provatus, or Oliver at moneybutton.com, or whatever your Paymail is, if you have one yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so Paymail combines those two parts of the Paymail protocol, and I made it rhyme intentionally, although in several interviews it kind of sounds like Bay and Pay are basically the same thing. So just to be clear, Paymail with a B, B-A-E mail, is my application, and it uses two aspects of PAY mail. So it sort of combines those two things in a way that allows you to send money by using the payment destination request, and also encrypt a message within that payment to the PKI of the receiving address. And what that means, what they use is a type of encryption that I didn't come up with. It's a well-known, well-used scheme called ECIES. It's elliptical curve integrated encryption scheme. And that takes the concept of public-private key pairs, which is how Bitcoin works generally. And it allows you to use your private key and somebody else's public key to encrypt a message so that your public key and their private key can be used to decrypt it. So it's not one key, like you each have a different method for decryption. So like the key sort of only exists in the computation, it's never stored anywhere. So it's a really secure way of transmitting information peer-to-peer, or in this case, Paymail to Paymail. So Paymail is just the first user interface that is designed sort of like an email inbox that uses those two parts of that protocol to allow people to receive private, secure messages into a value-ordered inbox. So that's the sort of economics of Paymail. All makes sense? I always sort of went on a monologue there for a while.
It makes about 90% sense, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I prefer, if you have any questions in terms of what I might not have explained particularly well, please fire away, or tell me, what are you interested in the Bitcoin space?
Gee, me personally, I'm a truck driver by trade, and for a long time I've been very interested in solving different problems with within logistics. And so the idea of the metanet, or this blocking of truth and data, I could see that. Listening to Satoshi or Craig, I could understand that there's something bigger here going on, and all that fluff with the last 10 years, okay, that was interesting, but now we're building. It looks like something very, very serious. I'm seeing serious applications at the start, and the problems that I could perceive with logistics. There's a really good chance that this is the right thing to be building upon, because it's amazing. Yeah,
definitely. Okay, so, I must admit I know nothing about logistics. I'd be curious to hear. Like what sort of, I mean, I assume that it's some sort of, you have to checkpoint things every time they move from location to location. So having sort of a record of all of the movements of all of your stock and things like that would be really important. Is that what you mean?
I guess so. I'm trying to solve, at the moment, I'm about halfway through understanding Bitcoin SV in its entirety, but I can see a way of replacing cardboard boxes, and that Bitcoin SV has a mechanism of tracking possibly everything, but probably tokenized would most likely be the smart contract people to build that part out. But so I'm still trying to figure out whatever's going to go on. But that basically really high complex logistics things could most likely be done efficiently through BSV. That's what I'm really interested in finding out, and that's why I'm digging right into this.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, let me think. So I met the guy from Tokenize, really nice guy in London. I think he's Australian, potentially, or at least he's been to Australia or something. Is he Australian? I'm not sure. So many of the guys in the space are Australian. I'm detecting your accent. I just assume you're in Australia.
Yeah.
You are. Okay. Good. That's a valid assumption. Great. Yeah. So I don't really know what to tell you about that other than, yes, I agree. I think that I think that this is sort of well understood these days because it's a 10-year-old technology that blockchains are going to help logistics in terms of being able to track things on the really individual item scale, RFID tag things and have them essentially sign miniature transactions as everything goes through. But again, we're really at the limit of my understanding of logistics and that as a business. All I can say is that if you take a look at the numbers, so if we could, I don't know if you've ever seen this before. You're new to the space, so you won't have seen when I posted this before. Let me just find a website for just a second. Are you familiar with the London Bitcoin meetup? Are you coming to CoinGeek?
Yes.
You are coming to CoinGeek. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to show you, I think I can share. Let me see if I can share a particular application. I will just share this desktop, which will do a crazy. Okay. Can you see my screen all right?
Yeah.
You can. So do the Bitcoin SV maths. This is a page on londonbitcoinmeetup.com/calculations. So this gives you some sense. I'll see if I can make the text bigger here. Some sense of why BSV is going to be the right blockchain to do logistics on. And it's really all about throughput, number of transactions. So for example, scaling testnet, we had a 2 gigabyte block just recently, and we're talking about 4,762 transactions per second equivalent. So if you compare that to pretty much any of the other blockchains, one of the issues is that you can have throughput and you can have parallel throughput. So you can start getting machines which can do 100 gigabyte blocks, and then you start getting into the 500,000 transactions per second. Then you start to see, okay, if we parallelize this on a massive scale, this is going to be really useful for logistics companies to track infinitesimally small items and their whereabouts around the world, if that's valuable information to put on chain.
I did a quick calculation of a shipping container, saying coming from England to Australia to Sydney and back again. A quick calculation of about 16 separate databases with different stakeholders, from the leaseholder to the shipping companies to the transport companies. And I'm assuming that those databases could somehow be that the blockchain would functionally be the one database, but all those stakeholders have different needs in terms of smart contracts, and it would just make it more cheaper to manage all that data, but for the same container, the same what's the right word, thing. The same thing.
The same physical object requires different sort of perspectives on it from different departments. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it should be. I'm just quickly assuming that should be cheaper on the blockchain.
It is.
Whoever, yeah.
It is. It's definitely cheaper. If you think of the massive amount of business that companies like what is it, SAP, that sort of thing do in terms of integrating these various companies and their differing systems. Some people are running in Unix, some people are running on Microsoft systems, and they're trying to integrate all of these different databases. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. But if you have one universal source of truth, then everyone can just apply their functions to that data. And I mean, that works today. I mean, that's how Baymail works. It's using blockchain data. That's how I'm developing other apps that are based specifically on creating a good user interface for data that is essentially the users upload their data, and it's on the blockchain, and it's a universal source of truth of things that that user has signed. And that sort of ties into the Paymail thing, right? So you can, for example, you can add your professional profile to the blockchain. So when people are looking up, oh, like, who is this person? What do they do? What are their expertise? There's actually, I mean, that information is on the blockchain for some people. You just kind of need to make containers then to see that information. And like you said, different people will be interested in different aspects of that person's profile, and so on and so forth. So definitely agreed. That's where we're going for sure. You should check out, I think there's a Norwegian company to the memory. I think it's like a Swedish guy that lives in Norway. I forget his name. I've met him a couple of times at CoinGeek and in London. And his company is called Unisot, so Universal Source of Truth, UNISOT. You should definitely look into them, because I believe he was, well, the example he gave, he's like an SAP guy, and the example he gave was the fish farms in the North Sea. So I think it was trout, or you know, seawater salmon of some sort. And he was talking about being able to track the actual individual fish, because they have face tracking for fish nowadays. So actually being able to follow the fish, and his story was great. It's following the fish and every cut. So you've got each of the fillets that are sold in the supermarket. So if there's ever a problem, you can trace it back to the actual fish, to the farm, and see what's wrong with the process and see if that can be fixed. So it's going to make companies hugely more profitable. And I think it's even a relevant part of that is the logistics, right? So not just the logistics company, but like literally everywhere from egg to plate, you can track everything. So definitely.
So with Baymail, what's your short-term, mid-term, and long-term features or extra values that you'd like to build onto it?
Sure. So I've had some recent feedback, which has made me sort of change a couple of things in the last few days even. So the short-term goal is basically just improve the speed of using Baymail, because I'm very aware of how cumbersome it can be sometimes. I mean, I should say the guys at MoneyButton are incredible devs, and I love their user interface that they've made for developers like me and all over the world that are building apps more readily than they would be able to without MoneyButton, because the wallet stuff is hard. I mean, I've built my own wallet as well, just to sort of so that I understand the technology a bit better. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to manage all the unspent transaction outputs and keep generating new addresses. The logic of that is difficult, and you get tangled up very easily. So MoneyButton's a great solution for solving all those problems. I guess my short-term goal in developing speed is doing smart things, like once people have decrypted messages, keeping them locally, but also keeping track of the fact that they've paid. And what I mean by that is they've paid a small fee, which is like a read receipt, because it's really important in Baymail for read receipts to be on chain. Because if you're contracting with someone, so originally I built Baymail because I needed to freelance contract with someone in Australia. And so I needed to write a message on chain saying, here are the terms of our agreement, kind of thing. So I think that's pretty expensive to do with like lawyers and things if it's an international contract. I'm not sure, but I felt both parties felt more protected by something being on chain, and we could both reference, and we know it's like basically a legal contract because we both signed it. So the important part of contracts like that, if I understand correctly, is that you both need to be able to read it in a standard fashion, basically on a computer screen. It's not some console log somewhere in a terminal. You know, it has to be in a readable format that anyone can just look up and check. And there has to be proof, like a signature, that it really is you that's checked. And by signing the opening or decrypting of a Baymail, you're essentially saying, I have read this in a standard format. And when I say I mean your Paymail has signed it, and Paymail can be traced back to your Paymail operator, which can be traced back to either an email address or a phone number. Eventually, essentially, you can find a legal entity or a person, and that's really important. So short term, make that experience faster with a couple of sort of shortcuts. If you just need to decrypt local stuff, it's lightning fast. It's like 100 milliseconds. If you need to decrypt from scratch, it can take 2 seconds. And the actual encryption process at the moment takes 7 seconds usually for a standard length message to one person. So speed, that's a short-term improvement. Midterm, I would say people want more features generally. People want to be able to save drafts, have multiple drafts saved. At the moment, it just saves the one thing you're writing in local storage, and there's no UI for that. It just does it. So not everyone knows that that's there. So draft storage and being able to organize things into different folders. Right now there's inbox. Once you've answered it, that goes into archive. And the archive is a whole big list that's value ordered. So if someone sends you something really valuable, it's right at the top, and it'll stay at the top pretty much forever until someone gives you something that's of more value. So I've had some requests for different sorting methods, sort by date and that sort of thing, which is how the sent box is ordered at the moment. Something I launched just yesterday is paid bay mails. So I guess, may I show you that?
Yeah.
That's easier to explain if I have, let's see. I'm sorry, I'm still doing some coding. Let me just switch to this screen. Okay, so this is Baymail. Have you used Baymail, by the way?
Yes.
You have,
I
okay.
think I've reached, yeah.
Great, I just wanted to make sure you're familiar generally. Let's see, so normally we just go to a compose page, and that's the index. I haven't actually made this public yet because I wanted to test with a few loyal users first, the most avid individuals. So it's just baymail.me/paid if you want to test it out in this sort of alpha stage.
Okay.
Do you have your money button handy? Otherwise,
I do.
You do, okay. Otherwise, actually, it might be helpful actually if I just do it all here since I'm sharing my screen. I'll send it to my wife's account instead. So you can add paid content. So let's just imagine that we want to do some sort of paid content. What it could be is an image simply. It could be something like a YouTube URL to a hidden link that's not actually publicly available. That was the first use case I sort of imagined with this. And then you set the decrypt cost. So let's say I want to charge 60 cents for this. And then this paragraph here is kind of like a sales pitch. So this is a picture of a beautiful cat. There we go. And perhaps to get the 60 cents from each user, maybe we want to pay 10 cents to get their attention. So it opens up a window to some interesting economics, I think. How much do you have to pay someone to get them to buy paid content? Like that, I don't think that's ever been done before. So, or at least not in this exact form, because you've never been able to pay with messages before. So to demonstrate what this looks like on the other side. There we go. I'm broadcasting my private conversations at this stage. Great. Never mind. Okay, so signed in as my wife now. There we go. Paid content we see here, and it's 60 cents to decrypt. This is a picture of a beautiful cat, and hopefully it is. I suppose there's nothing stopping me from lying about that. That's my alarm to do this interview. We're a bit early. Let's just switch that off for good. So there we go. So it works. I've paid my 60 cents. And the important part about this is I don't have to pay my 60 cents again. So if I need to log in again, and I go back to the same, it's a picture of a beautiful cat. You've decrypted this in the past, therefore it's free. And you can see how much faster it is when it's free.
Yeah.
So there's the quickest demo of paid content on Baymail I could do.
That was good. Wow, that it's definitely got some potential for like something. I watch a lot of YouTube, and I don't want to do Patreon, but I'd love to give 20 cents just once or whenever I like them. I'd much rather do it that way.
Totally.
Rather than this. Yeah, it's a big ask for me to sign up for the whatever it is a month.
Okay. So I'm a big YouTube fan as well. I'm a big YouTube consumer. I pay for YouTube Premium because advertising absolutely boils my blood. I can't stand it. I sort of get misophonia with it, you know, sort of an irrational rage. But I do love YouTube. I love learning through watching videos, and you know, coding examples are really easy to follow. There's a great Money Button YouTube series which essentially launched Paymail to some degree. I wouldn't have understood everything I needed to understand to build Paymail without that. So you know, it is useful for learning, definitely. So I think there are some solutions that you might not be aware of because you're new to the space, right? So I don't know if you've heard of Streamanity.
Only a little bit.
Briefly, okay. So Streamanity is a video streaming service that you can pair to your Handcash account using something called Cashport, or Handcash Connect, I think is the new name for it. So Handcash Connect is going to be released, I'm sure, in February. I don't know for sure. I would be speculating, but it's bound to be released soon. And that will allow you to connect to apps like Streamanity and essentially pay per second. And I think that's a really good method for live broadcast, for example. That's a perfect economic method for live broadcast. You know, people keep watching. You have to keep being entertaining, and they're paying to stay on when it's live. That makes sense. What it doesn't make sense for is pre-recorded content. And it really doesn't make sense for things like movies. If you imagine going to see a movie at the cinema where you pay per second, and so if the first act of the movie is terrible, you're like, I'm leaving because I don't want to pay anymore for this shit. Now, in some people's view, I'm sure Craig actually has said that's his ideal version of going to the movies. But I think because I was a cinematographer for 10 years, so that's my past to some degree, not in huge budget movies, but just independent films and that sort of thing. So in my view, as a sort of past artist, that really defeats the point of this sort of ticketing system. The ticketing system is, this is a piece of art that lasts 2 hours. You pay the price of admission to the piece of art, and if you don't like it, that's okay, and you can ask for a refund if you want. But the point is, it's specifically asking people to make a commitment to stay seated for 2 hours and allow the director to show you something. And so in my mind, being charged for every second you sit there is not a good thing in the movie theater. So perhaps the movie theater is the thing of the past, but what I'm trying to say is, I think of hidden YouTube URLs being injected into people's inboxes through Baymail as a paid piece of content is how I would choose to distribute my videos in future. So perhaps that's what we should have done with this, come to think of it. It could have been the first piece of content that goes out that way. I wonder who will be the first to pick up that accolade. Anyway, so that's where I see long-term future of Baymail is marketing content distribution as push content, because currently there's no other push content marketing in the Bitcoin space, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. And so, sorry.
Go on.
The feature you just showed me before, what do you call that again? With the
paid, P-A-I-D, paid.
Oh, so paid content.
Paid content, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's, but you're delivering it with email or with Paymail. You're delivering the paid content. Okay.
Yeah.
So presumably, if I have 1 million people, they would already be on my email Paymail list.
Sure.
And then I'm giving them a message saying I'm going to offer you a paid content coming up, and then you send them the paid content, and then half of them say yes and half of them ignore it.
Yes, exactly. So it's a risk. I guess the whole point of economics in this is risk allocation, right? So this is kind of your risk allocator. This is like you can charge whatever you want. You could say $100 for this piece of content, whatever it is. Maybe it's an online course that's otherwise hidden. And this is your marketing budget. So for each item you sell at $100, technically, well, let's not sell it for 1,000. Let's not pay 1,000 to get attention, but technically you could pay, if you have a conversion rate of like 30%, then you could pay $69.74 to get a huge amount of attention, assuming that they're going to pay you back $100 to decrypt. So if you receive a message into your inbox that has $100 incoming, or $70 incoming, you don't have to open it. But wouldn't you be curious?
You're saying that the people who make the content are paying us up to $100 for our attention?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'm intentionally using high numbers just to make a point, right?
Okay, gotcha.
So, usually people are spending 1 cent. But if you have 100 messages at 1 cent and you have one that's 84 cents,
yeah,
that's going to be at the top of your inbox. And
gotcha.
And essentially, the marketer needs to think of a sentence here that will attract enough attention and convince you to spend the $100 for the paid content. So I don't know, it's kind of funny to me because it's, I mean, it may be a ludicrous idea, but I'm really curious to see what people do with it, because never before have you been able to literally manufacture a complete business idea in 2 sliders and paid content and 1 sentence. Like, this is a really, if you're great at sales, like, you can make a lot of money with Paymail right now, because you can just send to anyone with a Paymail. And if you can convince them to buy whatever it is you have to offer, and if you continue to actually provide them with value, like, wow, you can make a lot of money.
Gary Vaynerchuk, where are you?
Right. You just need to make a margin. So, yeah, if you pay $5 and charge them $6,
yeah,
that might work. I don't know. It's never been done before, I don't think. So, yeah, I'm curious. I'm going to start trying. Also, if no one else does, I'm going to start doing it myself. Finding great content or making great content. I'll make tutorials and sell them to people through Paymail.
I mean, I've been using YouTube, and I'm like going, oh, this guy, he should know about money button and charge me, because like, but anyway, it's like later, so many things to do, but I'm sure I'm not sure if they're also happy with Patreon. I guess there's a lot of us watch for free, and but really appreciate them. Yeah, like at least 1 cent. Gee, so easy to as 1 cent as default.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of just content creators generally, you mean that you like enjoy their content, but maybe you don't sort of support them on whatever it is, Patreon, Subscribestar, BitChute. There's so many different platforms now that are specifically trying to allow people to accept money without YouTube taking a 10% cut, right? I mean, that's one of the things, even if you do make money through sort of super chats and things like that on YouTube, they still take 10%, which is necessary because of the infrastructure they have built to let you do that. But yes, frankly, I think there's going to be cheaper alternatives in future.
Yeah. So with in Baymail, it has those flyers when you have the inbox empty. Can you explain some of those? And I'm assuming you've read The Pumpkin Plan by Mike Michalowicz.
I actually haven't. No, I'm sorry. I must be leading you on.
One of the flyers says planting pumpkins.
Oh yes. So, okay. Right. Well, I must admit that literally just comes from a Craig meme. So it comes from him being called Pumpkin Man because, as far as I understand, he actually used to farm pumpkins. Either that, or I've misunderstood the origin of that meme. So, but no, what's the book? I'm curious now.
Oh, gee.
Do I misunderstand the meme? Perhaps.
That's all right. It's a book by an entrepreneur and a great author. His name's Mike Michalowicz. His
Okay.
more famous book is probably Profit First, but he talks, he's a really great teacher about all types of the aspects of business. And the Pumpkin Plan, one of them is like have a system and, you know, plant in fertile soil and other things. He's amazing. So anyway, I thought that perhaps you'd read it. Yeah.
Amazing. Do you know what? It sounds like that might be where the actual the meme comes from, because this woman in a crowd at you know, in an audience where Craig is speaking, shouts, "Go back to your pumpkin farm," or something like that. So maybe that's what that was in reference to, and I just didn't realize that because I hadn't read the book. So quite
Right.
possibly. I'm not sure. I never followed up on investigating the origin of that meme, but it was all over Twitch. Are you on Twitch yet, by the way?
Just a little bit.
A little bit. Okay.
Yeah, I threw out my first ever meme myself. That was good fun.
Good. Okay, I like those guys. It's just better than Twitter. It wastes less of your time, and well, you know, because of Baymail, I'm very keen to save time. I don't like wasting time.
Yeah. So, are you wanting to go for more a corporate clients, or what's your business plan, maybe, or your business aim?
Sure. So I do think that there is appetite for this in corporations, and what I mean by that is I think email is the bane of a lot of professional people's lives. And a lot of that is because of the sheer volume of unnecessary email that almost everybody in a sort of professional office environment receives. That was certainly my life prior to this, getting way too many emails, predominantly poorly researched marketing first touch outreach. So sometimes you know, you have email campaigns that are multi-touch, and there's maybe 12 episodes to a sort of story that this marketer is trying to convince you to buy their product with. But oftentimes they have misinterpreted what your job actually is. And so they think you're a target when you're not. And so there's such a huge bulk of the professional world that is full of these unintentional miscues in marketing. And the wrong people are paying the price there, because the receiver is paying for the sometimes junior marketer's error on the other end. And I think that the junior marketer who's sending an error should be the one that pays the price there. And all I mean really is not a huge amount. All I mean is really just an appropriate amount for the reading time necessary to bounce the email. Even reading a subject line takes a couple of seconds out of your day. Cumulatively, that's you know, hours in a year. I think there is a use case there. I think what the business plan is going to be is really getting businesses to adopt Paymail more generally. And I think that is probably not something that I can do on my own immediately, but it's something that I anticipate will happen with the movement that is happening with all of the businesses, you know, the 400 plus businesses that are building on BSV. A lot of them are going to benefit from the use of Paymail as a solution to identity, or at least a solution to address resolution. So I think, for example, I would go to maybe a small business that sends a lot of messages internally and is troubled by spam. You know, businesses that perhaps have managed to get themselves, ironically, on marketing lists for things which filter spam currently. So competing sort of spam filtering companies, I guess, would be my go-to target market for corporations. Starting with smaller businesses, because I'm more likely to be able to handle the load. I should say this would require me hiring at least two other individuals, because I know where my sort of expertise gaps are. And I think what we would end up doing is basically implementing a Paymail server within that company. And just like they have email addresses, you know, at company.com, they would have Paymail at company.com. And of course, at first, all that would help them with is internal communications. It just means that they could prioritize internal comms. So I guess target companies would be companies that are predominantly, talking internally rather than doing outreach. But I mean, it's a case of it's a what you call a networking principle, in terms of the value of that network depends on how many peers in the network. And if you consider a company a peer, you need to really get everyone on board simultaneously, and the more you have, the more valuable the overall effect is. So exactly on how to approach that, I must admit, I don't have a perfectly clear vision of how I'm going to do that. I have the will and I have the determination to keep trying. For now, I realize that I'm in this sort of safety net of people who are already interested in BSV. And I guess CoinGeek in February is the first time I'm going to be trying to articulate the business case for non-Bitcoin centric companies to onboard them to Paymail and Baymail. So that's the strategy as it stands.
As you were talking, I was just imagining a company as big as, say, BHP. They probably have 1,000 executive or managerials, and the CEO may really need to say something that's, important, and would pay them $5 to open that, or whatever. Whereas a sort of a more general, hey everybody, it's Christmas, I hope you have a holiday. It's a great holiday. It's like 5 cents for that mail to open it. So like, not everyone has to open it, something like that. So I can see how in companies there's a hierarchy of these people need to read this and really and respond maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the trouble at the moment is, so I should say that the reason I'm not going to market immediately is because this sort of friendly environment that we're operating in at the moment is testing out the economics of these things, because it's fairly new as an implementation of an idea. And I'm sort of curious to test out a couple of different economic models, such as the paid content model, such as a new protocol that is being developed as we speak, that I can't talk about until post-February. But so once those things are implemented, which I can say they are implemented, they're just not turned on yet for marketing reasons. I suspect that will solve these problems in a more eloquent, beautiful way, and it's more in line with the economics of how the world really works. And I think once that is implemented, then we can start talking to companies to say, this is going to give you a better signal to noise ratio on all of your communications. So I mean, you're right in that it's especially important for people like C-suite, people that are essentially anyone who is time poor, anyone who is always getting messages from hundreds or thousands of people on a daily basis, and they have to have several sort of people who hide their email address, for example. You get the CEOs that have first name dot last name and a random number at their company name.com because they get so much spam otherwise. So only a very select few people get access to that email address. With Baymail, you can publish your Paymail, and the most important people can always get in touch with you because essentially they can give you a higher signal to noise ratio. They can pay more to get your attention. And the important part there is for the person receiving not to benefit too much from that signal. But I will say no more on that front. So yes, the protocol needs to be fixed first, and then we can move forward and start going to market.
No worries. And when so in my playing with Baymail, then I looked on the blockchain and had a look what was there. So I could see that my Paymail was there and the receiver's Paymail was there. Is that always going to be only that public? As in, there's not going to be anything more public or less public going forward?
Yeah, so originally there was a public version of Baymail. I rebranded it because it was confusing people. This exact question was confusing people. So I think it's a better message to say that Baymail is always private. It's never going to be public information. In fact, I'm working to improve the privacy by, for example, removing the removing the recipient, because technically you only need that if you are doing block listening, which is one part of how Baymail was built. It was built on the basis of a metanet website that generates transactions and then listens to a specific type of transactions all the time. In the future world of Bitcoin, where we're literally doing peer-to-peer as individuals, sending a Baymail from me directly to your computer, maybe through some API of some sort, but it's not sending it to the Bitcoin blockchain, sending it to you, and then you send whatever you want to the chain. The idea is that you no longer, of course, need to explicitly say who the receiver is if they already received it, right? So I think it's pretty easy that for example, if I send something to your Paymail gives me a payment address, right? And I send the message and I also pay to that address. You will receive that money. So you can also receive the message, and therefore I don't need to include your name in the messages itself. I mean, what I mean by that is a clear text version of your name. I don't need to include. Gotcha. It could be hidden in the encrypted data. The important part is the important part to keep public is the signatures. So you encrypt it in Baymail. It encrypts your message, and then it hashes that, and then your Paymail will sign the hash to prove, like the sender will sign the hash to prove it was them that sent it. Now that's important because, for example, if you get a message from your future bank that's sending you Baymails because they're more secure, you want to make sure that it actually came from your bank and not somebody else. So we do need to keep those public, and therefore we do need to keep the actual Paymail in the op return, I think. Is it because if you then refer to that in future, the problem is if they lose their keys, they may have new keys. As long as their Paymail is the same, you can verify that that came from the same Paymail, if that makes sense.
Basically. What else? The flying man, the Baymail flying man, can you tell us a little bit about
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. I wondered who would ask me about that first. Okay, yeah, there's some details of that I don't want to talk about quite yet. I should just say, I tell you what, it came really, it was so happenstance. I needed a loader because I needed to let people know who had slow connections that there was an asynchronous operation happening, that their Baymails were being retrieved. So it was just loading ... at first. But I was like, okay, anyone could build this. And I took a look at the Bitcoin sort of group of developers, and I'm thinking, what do Bitcoin developers suck at usually? And I'm like, user interface. They suck at user interface usually, right? I mean, there is a couple of companies out there that do great user interfaces, but that's why they're so well known, is because they have great user interfaces. And a lot of the time, and I mean, obviously Craig outwardly broadcasts that he is a terrible UX designer. People would agree with him on that. Anyway, so my point of the superhero figure was to just give it some flair, give it some intrigue, so that people are like, oh, that's kind of funny. Oh yeah, it's like a superhero grabbing my messages, right? Okay, and that's where the idea of the superhero inbox came from. So I thought that I would try and imbue as much of my sort of philosophy of, I don't know, philosophy of life, my sentiment into the application as possible. And I always, and I think it's not uncommon, that I always, I feel like the hero character really resonates with me. And I think as early adopters in this new technology, that's what we all sort of feel like, and to some degree, is we're going against all odds and trying to make the world a better place. So yeah, so we're trying to save people's time. So that's what the Baymail superhero inbox is doing. Now there's some specifics about its geometry. that I will talk about at some later date, but it's not an accidental design. At first, I used sort of default CSS animation, and the wobble comes from that default CSS loading animation that is just free on the internet. But the design itself, I paid someone on $5 to design, and it was terrible, so I just did it myself. So sometimes, I mean, $5 is a great website, don't get me wrong, but sometimes you just gotta do it yourself, and I did. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah. The 400, oh, that's right. So Paymail is a generic protocol. So you're expecting competitors in this arena.
Yes, I hope so. I'm actually going to teach Joshua Hensley, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. What I mean is do a tutorial with Joshua Hensley to teach other developers how to make a competitor to Paymail, because the data is yours. Your messages are your data. You can do whatever the hell you want with them. My thinking on that is that I bet I can make a better user interface than the others in the space in terms of those who understand the back end. I think I can make a better front end. But I'm not perfect, and I'm sure people will come up with good ideas if they compete with me. And if they don't patent those ideas, I will steal them if they're good ideas. I will use them myself. So I'm definitely keen to encourage other people using the same protocol. So I should say Paymail uses a combination of two different Bitcoms. So Bitcom is one of the ways you can identify Bitcoin transactions and associate them with your application. Excuse me. So you can combine BAES, and there's a Bitcoin address attached to that, and SigCheck is the other one. Those two Bitcoms, and anyone using those can create Paymails as well. So in the next month, the plan is to open up the protocol, and hopefully Joshua is going to help and make the first competitor to Paymail that uses the same protocol, so that people, if they don't like the blue and red, for example, or if they don't like the, I don't know, if they prefer to use different wallets and things like that, anyone can build their own wallet that uses Paymail protocol without using MoneyButton, for example. They would just need to build all the wallet infrastructure as well. So technically, you could build your own wallet and use Paymail, and you'd be 100% assured that everything is perfectly private, safe, your data. You know, because some people out there don't want to have everything done for them, especially when they're thinking about sort of security concerns. So, I mean, that might be enterprises that want to build their own wallet system and use Paymail protocol without using money, but I would imagine that's how they want to use it eventually. They want to control their own code, undoubtedly.
Gotcha. Do you mind elaborating more on the us individuals own our own data? That's something I definitely was motivating me to look again at crypto, and I discovered Satoshi. There's like, you know, this whole thing of Google and all the rest of them like taking our data. It's like, so yeah, could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're all, and Twitter and things like that, they're all billion-dollar companies, right? Or almost $1 trillion, some of them. So you just need to think about it for just a minute to realize that the services they provide are free for the most part to the end user. To most people, it's free. Okay, marketers pay them, but for most people, it's free. So you just think about that for a second. Okay, it's free to use, and they're billion-dollar companies. Oh, that means that whatever I'm giving them is worth a lot more than the service they're providing me. So that's all you need to do to understand your data is insanely valuable. So on a sort of just an equation basis, services like emails, file storage, and so on and so forth, those things are valuable, obviously, because people love to use them, but they're not as valuable as the data that you're essentially giving to Alphabet and those other mentioned companies. I should say there's great people working at all those companies. I don't have anything against those people. I don't even have anything against those big companies, frankly, because I think they do provide great services. But as soon as you realize the economics of the situation, you're like, actually, we can probably get a better deal if we own our own data and sell it. So your original question was, what do I mean by own your own data? So with Alphabet, with Twitter, with Amazon, all of the things that you share with them in terms of messages you write, emails you write, files you upload to them, technically they have ownership over all of that data, as it resides on servers that they control. And for example, if a court were to subpoena them for that data, they would be at liberty to divulge that information about you. So it's not under your control. I guess that's how I would define ownership in a data sense, whether or not it's under your control to reveal it or not. So I don't have anything against a court subpoenaing me for my data and me complying with the court and giving them the data. But I do have a problem with some other company owning my data and maliciously giving it to some court in order specifically to, I don't know, indict me for something or whatever. So I guess the important thing to understand with owning your own data is that the thing that makes it yours is that nobody else has your keys. And the reason you know that nobody else has your keys is because you would no longer have any Bitcoin if they did. So the keys to spend the Bitcoin are part of the same HD wallet, so a hierarchical deterministic key wallet. There's the same root that gets you the payment keys and the encryption keys for your data. So if someone can decrypt your data, they can also steal all your money, and you know about it because you'd be broke. And I'm not saying that that would happen. I'm saying that people store billions of dollars in Bitcoin. That's how secure it is, right? So that's how secure your data now is. That's to the degree to which your data really does belong to you. So I hope that goes some way to explain it. So the data is encrypted on cloud servers, just like it would be with any other company, because what's on chain and Money Button and all of these other companies, of course, their infrastructure runs on similar devices that Google servers and Amazon. They probably run on Amazon servers for all I know. The point is, it doesn't really matter where it is if you're the only one with the key.
Yep.
So the control of the key is why it's secure ownership. I hope that answers the question.
Basically, and going on, I've never asked this question. So Bitcoin SV, nobody owns that? So everything on that is public, but no one owns Bitcoin SV? Is that
good question? I don't know what you mean. The name, or what do you mean?
The whole chain, like the whole thing.
The whole chain. Okay, so different people own different copies of it. So, for example, I'm sorry, I can't even remember their new name. Squire Mining, they renamed to like T something or other. I like Squire Mining. I'm going to go find what the name is so that let's see. No, apparently I'm not. Where is it? Squire Mining comes. So these are one of the owners. Square Mining doesn't exist anymore. No, I can't find it. SQR. No, I'm sorry. This is a very boring conversation at this stage. No, I'm not sure what they're called anymore. But the company that was previously Square Mining, for example, owns one copy or probably multiple copies of the blockchain that they keep on their servers. Craig's mining company owns another copy. In-chain. Their Money Button owns a copy. What's on Chain owns a copy. Essentially, any business that is a miner, or actually there are more businesses than just the miners, but certainly all the miners own the data. Then all the block explorers own the data. Then all of the content aggregators like Planaria Corp own the data as well. So I mean, I guess it's a good question. It's a peer-to-peer mining network as well. And they share that information as if it were public, but it is encrypted to private individuals. So if they all shut off their servers and delete everything, then yes, you don't have a copy, do you? So that would be an argument for running a Planaria, which is Unwriter's sort of content aggregating services. And you make sure that you store a copy of your own transactions. So Baymail, for example, I own the data that is served by my website. It's encrypted, so I can't read any of it. I have some control over that, as in I have a backup for people and they decrypt it from my servers, which means that if all of the miners suddenly shut off and there's some critical piece of information and someone's been using my service and I need to give up that information to my users, then I have it there and they can take all their data away. And if they want me to delete all their data, I can comply with GDPR and basically delete everything. So
yeah.
Yes. So it's kind of like loads of people own it, and loads of people own different fractions. So I own a portion of the blockchain, just the Baymail, though, just the Baymails.
Yeah. Gotcha. I think I understand. Talking of Unwriter, could you elaborate more about what he's built? It sounds like plumbing or infrastructure. When you start to build a new suburb in the suburbs, you have to dig and move things around. It sounds like he's doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so people have said that nChain built the plumbing. So I would say that Unwriter builds the taps and the sinks. So he builds tools, or they build tools which help people filter and project the massive amount of transactions going through BSV down to the particular transactions that they're interested in. So they can allow you to listen to a very specific address. They can allow you to watch your own wallet, for example. They can listen to only things signed by a particular paymail. They can listen to, and he's built all these tools for these specific purposes. So a couple of things, a listener, which is BitSocket, a sort of query language, BitQuery, which helps you do all the filtering. Planaria and Planarium work together in that it allows you to run a containerized server that pulls a bunch of content into your own server and then serves that back out in a website of some sort. So you can then query your own website, which is a small portion of the blockchain that you've identified as being important to your application or whatever. So those things are super easy to just copy and launch on your own server. If you've ever run a web server, you can run an Unwriter Planaria. Things like Bob Planaria interpret transactions in a sort of Turing complete computer tape and cell system that's quite interesting. Splits transaction data up into protocols as if they're sort of functions and arguments, which is really interesting and useful. That's what I use. And things like MOM, or MOM, I guess you would say in American. MOM Planaria is kind of like Bob, but with the addition of MetaNet protocol. So you can take a look at MetaNet trees, and that's what citymeta.net uses, which is my tool for demonstrating MetaNet protocol in a sort of visual way. You can make a paymail and you can start creating MetaNet trees with that paymail pretty easily. So yeah, so I think those tools are great, and it's sort of like plumbing, but it's one level above plumbing, because the plumbing is Bitcoin scripts, parallelization of transaction processing, and that's all miners. It's all miners. And I feel like Unwriter is building this new type of company that's more like what's on chain. It's like a developer-centric what's on chain, where you have different ways to interpret transactions. And I think that'll be known as the first archive company, because the miners no longer have an incentive to keep op returns after a certain time. I mean, they can't be spent, so there's no point in the miner keeping it. They could just prune that data. They don't need to keep it. They do at the moment, but they don't need to. I think companies like Planaria Corp will keep it.
Right, I see. And then, yeah, because we might, for various reasons, various applications, we need access to it or function with it.
Yes, yeah. So the language in BSV over the last year has been it's immutable data, which is true, but it doesn't mean you'll always have access to that immutable data. So, you know, if everyone deletes every copy of that data, technically it doesn't exist anymore. All you know is the hash. So the data is not actually retrievable anymore. But if you kept it yourself, you can hash it and prove that it was always there.
Gotcha.
So,
interesting.
So yeah, as an application developer, it is your responsibility to keep the data that you need to keep your application running. That's how I see it.
And so what's the thing you're looking most forward to in the upcoming CoinGeek conference in London?
Oh, that's a great question. Wow, what am I most looking forward to? So the last one I was at, I missed Seoul, unfortunately. I was in Toronto though, and I would say that the developer day in Toronto, and specifically Ryan X. Charles's speech there, best part of the whole experience. I just loved everything he had to say, and that's when they launched Paymail. So that really blew my mind, and I loved it. Last time they were in London was the announcement of MetaNet in November 2018, to the memory. And that was mind-blowing. And I only a month ago finally managed to make my own MetaNet trees with a wallet. So that's how long it took me to understand. And I have had the white paper on my desk for that whole time. I was just trying to understand, how the hell do we use this? Like, what is it good for? And I'm certain that no one has actually used it properly yet still. Or perhaps they have, and I hope that somebody announces that they've actually been using MetaNet to good effect. Because you can see loads of MetaNet transactions happening, but I think they're all just tests still. So I would love to, that's not true. There's a couple of services that use them, like Preve, for example, I think are MetaNet transactions. Anyway, so that's what I'm most excited about this time. It's actual implemented MetaNet and Paymail combined. I hope someone's done that. I'm really interested to see Gravity's wallet being launched, because last time we were in London, they hinted at that, and it's been a long time. And I'm one of the alpha testers, so I know they're extremely close. I'm excited to see how much adoption is going to suddenly happen when they open up, because that makes it really easy for people in the UK to be onboarded, because now they can just buy BSV. Whereas before, you sort of have to go through a broker. It's a little bit awkward to get it, or you pay huge fees in any case. What else? Meeting people, honestly. Like, there's so many friends that I've made in the last couple of years that I pretty much only see at CoinGeek conferences. So I'm really excited to see the likes of Brendan and Mr. Z, who I now shall call Austin, because I had forgotten his first name because I just see him online. You know, and Satchmo, Luke, be great to see him again. Daniel Krawitz, I hope he's there as well, because I saw him in Toronto. And Ryan and Mige. I don't know if Mige's going, actually. I can't remember whether he said he was going, but I think Ryan might be going, yeah. Yeah, so seeing people and meeting people that I've never met before in the space, that's really what those conferences are about in my mind, is being shoulder to shoulder with some of these absolute intellectual giants that you can just try your best to sponge or siphon off some of this genius and implement one or two of the ideas that they cast aside as not important enough to pursue themselves. But just, you know, you can just understand what they've said, so you might be able to sort of scrape together something in resemblance to some of the ideas that come out of the conversations there.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. Yeah, Craig Wright came out and started to speak in depth and elegantly and long conversations, so we could understand the essence, the detail, and the vision, and then yeah, we can all actually build something really great. And then all these amazing people coming out of the woodwork and building something amazing. Yeah,
it's exciting times.
Totally.
Yeah, it'd be great to meet you in person.
Yeah.
It's different somehow. I don't know how tall you are. That's one of the most the most well, that's the one thing you can't do in any other way than physically meeting. So yeah, it'd be good. Awesome. If you don't have any more questions, I'm gonna get back to coding.
It's been great to talk to you, Dagan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in London.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure. It's so good to meet someone who's enthusiastic and actually has some like business knowledge in terms of like a real industry where this can be applied. Like, it's so good to see. I wish you all the best. I'm sure you're going to meet the right people in London and you're going to get this ball rolling. It's going to be amazing.
You bet. All right.
All right. Take care of yourself.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow.